This is the meeting of the Louisiana Tax Commission is hereby called to order. This meeting is being held at the Office of the Louisiana Tax Commission at 1051 North 3rd Street, Suite 225, Baton Rouge, Louisiana. The date is Wednesday, January 8th, 2025. The time is 9:03. Roll call, Madam Secretary.
Chairman Rousseau. Acting Chairman Leone.
Here.
Commissioner Romick. Commissioner Guidry.
Here.
Commissioner Frazier.
Here.
3 present and a quorum.
No old business. That's approval of the minutes.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes for December 26, 2024.
Any objections? Any discussions? Stands adopted. Items considered for change orders.
Chandrika Banks on behalf of the Louisiana Tax Commission. Today we have a total of 5,428 change orders. Staff has reviewed those change orders and requests to approve 5,333, place 90 in pending status, and deny 5. Staff requests approval of these change orders.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve 5,033 change orders and place 90 in pending status and deny 5 for reasons given by staff.
Any objections? Any discussions? So adopted.
Chandrika Banks on behalf of the Louisiana Tax Commission. Today we have a total of 101 prior pending change orders. Staff has reviewed those change orders and requests to approve all 101 prior pending change orders. Staff requests approval of the prior pending change orders.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve all 101 change orders for reasons given by staff.
Any objections? Any discussion? So adopted. Consideration of assessor's application for rehearing of Perdido Energy Louisiana LLC for tax years 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022 for parish of Beauregard, Evangeline, Rapides, Vernon. Any motion?
Good morning, Commissioner. Brian Eddington on behalf of the assessors for Beauregard, Evangeline, Rapides, and Vernon Parish. I've been dealing with the Tax Commission for 25 years. Literally, my first case was in December of 1999. And in that 25 years, this is the first application for rehearing that I've ever filed. Understand and appreciate that this commission is fairly new, that this is one of the first major business personal property appeals that the commission heard. And with all due respect, this is one of the most troubling decisions I've ever seen, given the history of this case. Kind of start with the ground rules. The Louisiana Constitution grants the assessor the sole and exclusive authority to value property for assessment purposes. The Constitution also provides for a review of the correctness of those assessments. But the courts have repeatedly stated that under the Constitution, the Tax Commission's function is one of review and not assessment, and that the Tax Commission cannot usurp an assessor's exclusive authority to make assessments. Also, since this is a case that involves solely the issue of depreciation, it's important to note that the law has long since been established, undisputed, that the taxpayer's burden is to provide evidence in support of their obsolescence claim to the assessor. The courts have also said that the Tax Commission cannot usurp an assessor's exclusive authority to make assessments by considering evidence that was available to the taxpayer but withheld from the assessor. This bill has its genesis going back to 2018, the year after Perdido bought these assets. They filed a protest, and in support of that protest, submitted 2 documents, an act of sale and an appraisal. At hearing, the Tax Commission declared that the appraisal was unreliable and that the sale was a sale of a going concern and not the sale of individual assets and therefore rejected the appeal. Perdido appeals that case first to the 19th Judicial District Court. They uphold the ruling. They appeal to the Louisiana First Circuit Court of Appeal. First Circuit goes through an extensive analysis of the evidence. And they conclude that Perdido failed to carry its burden of proof and that the tax commission was left with no choice but to uphold the correctness of the assessments by the assessors. Perdido then applies for review by the Louisiana Supreme Court, which rejects that request. Now, all this takes time. And by the time we get to the Supreme Court, it's 2022. And if you're wondering why you're hearing appeals for 19, 20, and 21 in 2024, the reason is we were waiting on guidance from the courts. Now, while those appeals were going through the court, Perdido continued to request obsolescence, submitting, and this is important, the exact same information to the assessor. In fact, Perdido's attorney asked their tax rep about it. Ask him, why did you submit the same information? And his answer was, and so why did you continue to render in the same manner for 19, 20, and 21 that you had done for 2018? His answer was, we had pending, there was still a pending case, a pending issue that had not been resolved. And so we didn't feel it was appropriate to change anything while the case was ongoing through the courts. On cross-examination, I followed up and again answered, so the idea was that we had an appeal, 2018, and we presented all the data with that renditions. The case was still out in the courts, but whatever level of court, depending on each year, whatever level appeal it was under. And so we provided the same data to support our position that we would have taken originally. Now, again, in 2018, the court found that Perdido failed to carry its burden of proof and also found that the tax commission had no choice but to uphold the assessment. For 19, 20, and 21, again, the exact same evidence, this commission awarded a $55 million obsolescence reduction. This commission often states that it's a real stickler for the rules, and it's important to note that the rules promulgated by this commission in 2018 and effect in 2014 set forth the standard of review, the standard upon which the commission can overturn and reverse an assessment. Section 3103 H1 provides 6 reasons you can overturn an assessment. And that is because it's in violation of the constitutional or statutory provisions, in excess of the authority of the assessor, made upon unlawful procedure, affected by other error of law, arbitrary or capricious or characterized by abuse of discretion or clearly unwarranted exercise of discretion, or not supported or sustainable by preponderance of the evidence. This commission issued a 35-page ruling, again, awarding a $55 million obsolescence reduction. At no point does it address any of these factors. Instead, the tax commission announces, and I want to read this because I want to make sure I get the verbiage just right. The commission's rules and regulations, which require that functional and economic obsolescence shall be considered when performing a cost approach, necessarily authorize and require that an assessor consider production and income data when considering obsolescence. There are 2 problems. Actually, there are more than 2, but there are 2 really clear problems. One, stating that an assessor is required to consider production and income data ignores the fact, and this is undisputed, it's in the record, Perdido did not provide any production and income data to the commission. And also, and with all due respect, announcing that an assessor is required to consider production and income data, even setting aside the fact they didn't provide it, ignores the constitutional history. For years, assessors and the oil and gas industry worked together to try and address this. Problem was, it was unconstitutional to consider income and production data until the Constitution was amended in, I believe it was late 2021, maybe 2022. Even then, all that constitutional amendment did was green light the tax commission to promulgate rules and regulations. It was not until 2023 that this tax commission promulgated rules and regulations that even allowed, much less required, an assessor to consider income and production data. It's kind of raised an interesting question. If all the tax commission had to do was announce in a after the fact review of an assessment that assessors are required to consider income and production data, what was the point of the constitutional amendment? What was the point of the years upon years of rulemaking this commission went through? There's simply no precedent for this prior to the 2023 rule change in the constitutional amendment that to require an assessor to consider income and production data, again, which was never presented to them. So I will simply close with a question I posed in my original filing. If Perdido failed to carry its burden of proof in 2018, leaving the commission with no alternative but to uphold the assessment made by the assessors, how did this tax commission reach a different conclusion and award again a $55 million obsolescence reduction when Perdido submitted the exact same information to the assessors? I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Perdido.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Acting Chairman. Good morning. Kyle Palazzolo for Perdido, the taxpayer here. My comments will just be brief this morning. Really, there's nothing that Mr. Eddington said this morning that wasn't presented in the hearings that we had, the two different hearings that we had this year. It was also acknowledged and evaluated by this commission in the consideration of the matters and even spoken about in the opinion. So it's not, this is nothing new that was brought forward here in this application for rehearing. These are the same arguments that were given before. And this commission applied the authorities that were available to it to make the decision that it made, which are well supported by the record. I will acknowledge, though, that this has been a long procedural history here. A lot has happened. There were long appeals here, and there were developments along the way. You know, in late 2020, the D90 energy case was issued by the Louisiana Supreme Court. What followed there was some legislation in the legislature that made some procedural changes to the rules. Also, later, the constitutional amendment was passed by the legislature and then voted on by the people to employ the allowance of the income approach to value to be considered as well. A lot of things happened before these cases went to hearing this year, all right? And so this is sort of the exact kind of thing that the Supreme Court in D90 sort of envisioned when it issued its ruling, that you are allowed to have a full evidentiary hearing. You're allowed to hear witness testimony, the evidence that's presented to you, and evaluate those things. I will say that the 2018 commission didn't have that guidance. They didn't even know if they had the authority to have a full evidentiary hearing. Even that was in contest at the time. So D90 clarified many things, including your authority to do what you do in correcting assessors. You're not making an assessment, and you didn't make one here. You did a corrective analysis, and so That analysis allowed you to look at the evidence that was before you to make the decision that this was an asset divestiture and not a going concern analysis. That was based upon your analysis, differs from the prior commission, but based upon the facts as they were presented to you in the hearing, which you're allowed to consider. What this commission also did was looked at the evidence that supported economic obsolescence. And what it did is it went through all of the steps of Rule 907A6, not just the step that says employ the tax tables for a cost approach, but all the way through to the bottom that says economic obsolescence information can be considered. A sale, arm's length sale can be considered as a measure of obsolescence as well. And so this commission went through and completed the circle on that, which is fine to do. So the laws and the rules were complied with here. The tax commission recognized that the taxpayer does have to carry its burden of proof of obsolescence. And the taxpayer did that by providing the evidence that it provided. And like I said, this was all mixed in with a very contorted and long procedural history. The difference between what Mr. Eddington's saying and what this commission did is this. You did not employ an income approach to value. You employed an analysis of economic obsolescence that used income and production data. That does not violate the Constitution. That does not violate any law. It is something the taxpayer provided, which was supported by evidence that there was a significant economic distress that was going to kill these assets. That's what you looked at. You did not substitute your opinion of value based upon income approach as opposed to what the assessor did. You completed the economic obsolescence evaluation. And I think that was entirely proper. And so we would just submit that, the arguments here are no different than what you've already considered, and this application should be denied.
Chris, if I might, I want to clarify one very important point. Mr. Palazzolo said that you considered information that was presented. I want to be clear. Record's very clear. It was not presented to the assessor. The reason it was not presented to the assessor was because they had an appeal going, and as their tax rep testified, they did not believe it would be appropriate to provide additional information to change course. Now, the law's real clear. The law's been real clear for a long time. A taxpayer seeking an obsolescence reduction is required to present to the assessor information supporting the claim. They did not. Mr. Palazzolo said there's been a lot of changes. There have been. I want to be real clear. If you go back and read the First Circuit Court of Appeals decision in the Perdido versus Acadia Parish Board of Review, they discussed D90 at length. But there have been some other changes. There have been some changes in the rules and regulations promulgated by this commission. The regulations now provide that review of the correctness of assessment is limited to review of the evidence presented to the assessor prior to the deadline for filing a protest with the Board of Review. The regulations also now have very specific guidelines on the 6 exclusive factors the tax commission can utilize to overturn and correct an assessment. With all due respect, you read the entire 35-page ruling, they're never referenced. The fact that this evidence was never presented to the assessor, never referenced. The fact that we've already been to the Louisiana Supreme Court was never addressed. Again, the reason 19, 20, and 21 were held in abeyance, not heard until 2024, was because we were waiting for guidance from the courts. Courts provided that guidance. They real clearly stated Perdido didn't carry their burden of proof and that the tax commission had no alternative but to uphold the correctness of the assessment. And with all due respect, this commission erred when on the review of the exact same evidence submitted to the assessor, they reached the exact opposite conclusion and awarded a $55 million obsolescence reduction. Not because the assessors committed any error. Again, there's no suggestion in that 35-page ruling that the assessors committed any error. And absent that finding, there is no basis to overturn an assessment. Thank you, Commissioners.
Mr. Acting Chairman, just a brief response. The record is clear on what was provided and when, and we kind of go through that in our opposition brief that we provided to you. We discussed that. We discussed all, you heard extensive testimony about communications between the assessor and the taxpayer. I also pointed out in our brief that D90 allows a full evidentiary hearing, which also allows this commission to consider things that weren't provided to the assessor. And the court says that if that wasn't the case, what would be the point of an evidentiary hearing? Okay, and in a case like this, where things were evolving and it was on appeal for so long, this is kind of the perfect case to allow things like that to give you the latitude to do that. I also want to point out that the legislative changes that Mr. Eddington just spoke about, those rules don't apply to the 2019 to 21 hearing at all. They do not apply. Those rules, those laws went into effect after that. And also that the Supreme Court here in the D90 case, the Supreme Court's never weighed in. They denied the writ, which means they're not making an opinion one way or the other. That's what that means. And so the First Circuit's plurality decision is, given the weight that it's going to be given. And so for those reasons, we feel like that you're well within your authority to deny these applications.
Only one. I want to correct a misstatement. I wasn't referencing statutes. I'm referencing the rules and regulations of this commission, which provide that the review of the correctness of an assessment is limited to review of the information provided to the assessor. It's the regulations that sets forth the 6 exclusive grounds for reversal or modification of an assessment. Again, it's undisputed that the evidence this commission relied on was a spreadsheet, was never provided to the assessors. And if you read the 35-page ruling, there's no reference to the standard review, the grounds for reversal. And had the commission applied them, you can look at them. The assessors violated none of those. The assessments violate none of those 6 standards. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you.
Mr. Acting Chair, before you have an application for rehearing that's been filed by the assessors for both the Perdido matters for tax years 2019 through 2021, as well as the Perdido matter for 2022. Your options are you can certainly take it under advisement if you'd like, or you can accept a motion to grant the application for rehearing or a motion to deny the application for rehearing. Certainly, you can also ask the parties any questions that you may have.
Any questions, parties? No questions. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to deny the application for a rehearing.
Mr. Acting Chair, you call for discussion on the motion
Yeah.
if there is any.
Any discussion on the motion? Any objections to the motion? Motion stands adopted.
Thank you, Commissioners. Are we doing? Stay here.
Next item on the docket is the appeal of Marmac LLC versus Assessor Wendy Thibodeau in Lafourche Parish Board of Review, docket numbers 2322057-004 through 008.
Wendy Thibodeau, Lafourche Parish Assessor.
I do Tori Chasson, Lafourche Parish Deputy Assessor.
I do Andrew Hall, LLC.
I do Jason Hedrick, Finance Director for McDonald.
I do Patrick Stan, President of McDonald.
Mr. Acting Chair, the taxpayers appeal, so the appropriate.
Not aware of.
Okay, taxpayer.
So, Mr. Acting Chairman, Commissioners, just to give you a little background before we talk to witness. I think the issue before you today is pretty simple. Basically, we're talking about the valuation of 5 barges that McDonough Marine reported to the assessor. And the issue here is on the lat forms, they reported the actual costs that McDonough paid for these barges when they bought them to the contractor. And in the record is the contracts that they provided to the assessor before the date about what they actually paid for them. So on their lat forms, they've submitted that data. And when they got their proposed assessments from the assessor's office, she had not used their actual cost. She used the base cost that is in the commission's regulations, but it is a significantly different and higher value. And so the real issue here is the assessor required under the regulations to use the actual cost of the vessels, or can she ignore that and use the base cost that's in the commission's regulations, which are to be used, as I understand it from reading them, when there is no actual cost provided, or there's some reason to believe the actual cost that provided is unreasonable. So with that in mind, I'll go ahead and have my witnesses provide the background for y'all to consider our position. Thank you. First is Mr. Patrick Stant. So could you please state your name for the record?
My name is Patrick Stant.
And how are you currently employed, Mr. Stant?
I'm the president of McDonough Marine Service.
Okay, what does McDonough Marine do?
We are predominantly a barge leasing chartering company.
And so as president of McDonough Marine, what are your day-to-day responsibilities?
I handle the main focus of the business, including the financial responsibility and operational direction of the company.
So are you familiar with the types of barges and other assets that McDonough Marine has and leases?
Yes, I am.
So what types of vessels does Marmac own and lease?
We own approximately 650 vessels. We own barges, both spud barges, deck barges, material barges, shale barges. We own some tugboats, both conventional and truckable tugboats.
And where are those barges located?
We have operations primarily in the Gulf of Mexico, also on the East Coast to New York and the Midwest.
So in this matter, there are 5 barges at issue, and they have identification numbers SH253, SH254, SH260, SH261, SH262. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And I want to refer you to, in the exhibit packet that was submitted by your tax rep, at page 15, there's a picture of an SH barge. And can you tell the commissioners what that shows?
Yes, that picture indicates the vessel, the SH228, and is a shale hopper barge.
So is it the same type of barge as the barges that are at issue here?
Yes,
And so what are these barges used for?
these barges are certificated to haul non-hazardous oil field waste. The waste itself is a defined commodity. It is by Coast Guard. It is as listed as not pumpable by conventional means, less than 10% liquid by volume, and no free floating oil.
So with respect to the 5 barges at issue here, how are they being used during the tax period at issue?
They're being used in the service of moving non-hazardous oil field waste.
So they were under what, a charter?
Yes, they were chartered to a company that would then use the barge to move the waste.
So in your charters, what are some of the key terms that you have in your charter of barges like the 5 at issue?
The key terms is that the charterer takes responsibility of the barge and uses it in a manner that is consistent with the documentation of the barge.
What, if anything, is in your charter about insurance, for example?
The charterer, in this particular instance, they have to provide the insurance, both the hull and the liability coverage and pollution associated with the charter and the vessel.
So if they, under their charter, one of your barges is destroyed, what would happen then?
If a barge was either a constructive total loss or an actual total loss, then they would pay the company the value stated in the charter order, which defines the terms under which the barge is specifically chartered.
Do you recall what that number is for the 5 barges at issue here?
Each of those barges have a hull value of $600,000.
So the five barges at issue, do any of them carry material like rocks and soil and rubbish for dumping into an ocean, river, or lake for land reclamation?
No, they do not.
Is there another term you would use to describe a barge that can do that?
In terms of dumping material, a split hopper or a dump scow is used for the dumping of rock and aggregate associated with projects referenced that you just mentioned.
And these barges do not do that.
These barges are not capable of doing that. Neither are any other inland hopper barge.
So, Mr. Stand, are you familiar with when these barges were actually purchased by McDonough Marine?
Yes, I am.
I'm going to refer you to page 19 of the taxpayers exhibit book and ask that you review that document and tell me what that is.
This is a contract under which Marmac LLC, DBA McDonough Marine Service, contracted with Trinity Marine Products for the construction of these barges.
Refer you to page 30 on exhibit A and point you to the middle where it says price and payment schedule. Can you read that, please?
Yes, the price and payment schedule, the contract price for the vessel is $314,655 per vessel.
And so, and these are for vessels for 2001, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so, two of the vessels at issue and that would be, SH 253 and SH 254 were purchased in 2001, correct?
That is correct.
And so, looking at that contract and understanding that those two numbers, is it your testimony that those two vessels were purchased by McDonough Marine for $314,655 in 2001?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, I'm going to refer you to page 32 of the taxpayers exhibit. And can you tell the commissioners what this document is?
This is the vessel construction agreement associated with 6 open top tank barges.
And what's an open top tank barge?
These barges are hopper barges that are classified as tank barges. They are listed as open top. So they are a tank barge configuration or listed as a classification as a tank barge, but they are built as an open hopper barge.
So I'll refer you to page 49, again, exhibit A, and again, under the price and payment schedule. Can you read that to the commission, please?
Yes. Exhibit A with this document is the price and payment schedule of these barges. The contract price for the vessel is $797,237 per vessel, subject to adjustment.
So again, with respect to the three barges that were at issue here for the 2014 period, that's SH 260, SH 261, and SH 262, it's your testimony that McDonough Marine paid $797,237 per barge for their acquisition.
That's correct.
So in the assessments that we have from the assessor, she has valued these barges at over $2 million for the 2014 barges and a little over $1.1 million for the two barges built in 2001. Has McDonough Marine purchased any of these similar type barges at issue for a price close to $2 million anytime in the recent past?
No, we have not.
And let me ask you this, has Marmac or Montgomery stole barges like the hopper barges that issue here recently?
Yes, we have.
And what was Montgomery able to sell those barges for?
$215,000.
So is it your testimony that that's sort of the market value of these types of barges currently in Louisiana and Lafourche Parish?
Yes.
That's all the questions.
Couple of questions. Brian Eddington, I'm counsel for the Lafourche Parish Assessors Office. First, I have a question. There are a total of 23 barges owned by Marmac, subject to assessment in Lafourche Parish. You've only protested the value of 5 of those. Can you explain why?
We feel the valuations are not in line with what they should be.
What about the other 18?
We are comfortable with those.
Now, were those other 18 assessments based upon the tables promulgated by the tax commission, just like these 5, or do you know?
I can't answer that.
Okay. You mentioned a $215,000 sales price just a moment ago. That's scrap sales though, is it not?
No, sir, it is not.
And do you have any documentation to show sales at that level, $215,000?
We do have a purchase agreement. Yes, sir.
Current purchase agreements?
I'm sorry.
Current purchase agreements?
It's one that has been executed and sold. Yes.
Because I'm wondering how the tax commission tables can be so far off by a factor of 10 if your testimony is to be taken at face value. Has Marmac gone to the tax commission and addressed his concerns about these tables through the rules and regulations process?
I'll let our attorney and our finance director answer.
Okay. No further questions.
I would like to call Jason Hedrick, please.
Good morning.
Can you please state your name for the record?
My name's Jason Hedrick.
And how are you currently employed, Ms. Hedrick?
I am the finance director for McDonough Marine Service.
So what are your day-to-day job responsibilities for Marmac?
I am responsible for the accounting and finance operations of the company.
For you to the assessor's exhibit 4, which is at pages 8 and 9. And can you tell the commission what this document is?
Yeah, these are simply the LAT 11 worksheets that are provided by the parish every year for our company to document what vessels we need to declare for property taxes each year. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry. Yes, these documents are the LAT 11 documents that are provided by the parish every year. And we simply list the barges that are located in that parish on the first day of every year.
So on pages 8 and 9, there are 3 barges identified, correct?
Correct.
And so, these are 3 of the barges at issue in this appeal, correct?
There's actually, I believe, 5.
Well, I'm talking about this
But
document.
on this document,
Yeah.
yes, there's
So
3.
can you tell the commission what data was provided by Marmac for each of the barges that is?
Yeah, simply we list the name of the vessels, what type of vessels they are, as well as any we also provide the amount of days that the vessels have worked within the previous year for them to calculate an obsolescence or depreciation. And then also we would list the years so that they can calculate depreciation.
And so with respect to it says cost, and I think as Mr. Stant testified, that was the cost that Montgomery paid for these barges,
That's
correct?
correct.
Okay. Where does your office get that number from?
We have all of these numbers in our accounting system. When we purchase the vessels, obviously we set these vessels up from an asset standpoint and start depreciation basis. for taxing book.
And let me ask this question. This document's signed by, it looks like Nick DiMaggio. Can you tell the commissioner
Correct.
who that is?
Nick DiMaggio is our staff accountant, and he actually is the person on, that handles and fills out all these forms for us every year.
And let me refer you to page 16 of the assessor's exhibit. And again, ask you to tell the commission what this document is.
Again, this is, still lat 11, and simply states the additional vessels.
And this one's for vessel SH 54.
254, correct.
I'm sorry. And then again, if you turn to page 20 of the assessor's exhibits, again, this is another lat 11 filed by Mr. DiMaggio on behalf of McDonough Marine. And on page 2, SH 253 is reported to the assessor, correct?
That's correct.
And again, the same information was provided regarding this barge, correct?
Correct.
So do you know how many vessels in total that McDonough Marine reported to Lafourche Parish for 2023?
I believe it was, if I'm not mistaken, was it 31? I believe it's 31.
And again, you may not know the answer. If not, I can ask Mr. Hall, but in Mr. Eddington's question, do you know why McDonough did not protest any of the other barges that were reported to Lafourche Parish and assessed?
Yeah, and I'll let Mr. Andrew handle that, but it was my understanding that the assessments came in close to what we have actually have capitalized those vessels for, in our fixed asset system.
So in other words, what the cost was of those.
Correct.
So what we reported as cost.
Correct.
That's all the questions I have for Mr.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. Help me clarify. Are we talking about vessels or barges when you mentioned the number 31 and 23 from the other gentleman? Because I'm not sure what exactly we're talking about now. We're
All right,
talking
well,
about barges
I'm
or
sorry,
vessels?
that's fair, Commissioner. It's my fault. It's all the, what we're talking about is barges, solely barges. I'm sorry, I apologize. I use the word vessel because it says that on the lat form. The 5 barges at issue are part of a fleet of 30-something barges that were reported to Lafourche Parish for this year.
Couple quick questions. I want to follow up to a question I asked the first witness. You heard his testimony that his belief he could sell these barges for about $215,000. And that's about 10% of the value listed on the tax commission tables, is it not?
Correct.
Since I was told to ask some of the subsequent witnesses, I'll ask you, did Marmac ever come to the tax commission and present this information during the rules and regulations to address which apparently believes this grossly incorrect number in the tables?
I am not aware.
Okay. Thank you. No further questions.
Well, let me ask this.
Sure.
Is,
Sure. Yeah.
so
that's all I
in
have.
prior periods, was this an issue?
This was not an issue
So there was nothing.
until this period.
So before this period, you didn't have any issue with the way they were being valued?
Correct.
Thank you. No more questions? I call Mr. Andrew Hall. Can you please state your name for the record?
Andrew Hall,
And Mr. Hall, how are you employed?
by Kroll LLC, Director of Property Tax.
And so what involvement, if any, did you have in this matter on behalf of McDonough?
Kroll LLC is engaged by Marmac to review property tax assessments to make sure that we are in agreement with the valuation methodology and the ultimate valuations.
So you were engaged by Marmac to assist with the Lafourche Parish assessments.
Correct.
Let me refer you to pages 1 through 5 of the taxpayers' exhibits and ask, these are documents that you prepared.
Correct. I prepared these.
So let me ask you, with respect to the fair market value assessed by the assessor, I assume you just took that off the assessment documents, the rolls that were promulgated by the assessor.
That is correct.
So the proposed fair market value that you have here, for example, if you look at page 2, it's $123,737. How did you calculate that amount?
I took the original construction cost, multiplied that times the table 703B composite multiplier, and then there was not obsolescence to be applied. So that number determined the taxpayer's request for fair market value.
And let me ask, so there, in this matter, with respect to the 5 barges, there's no request for obsolescence, is that right?
No request for obsolescence. They were in use and did not meet the standards by Chapter 7 for obsolescence.
So let me refer you to page 6, where there's a little chart. And so this, tell the commission what this chart is on page 6 of taxpayer exhibits.
This chart was an effort to clarify and make it very clear how the proposed taxpayers requested fair market value were determined and calculated. And so this clearly shows each of the 5 barges, the vessel names, the year purchased, year constructed, per the contracts that were discussed earlier, the days rented, which were 365, the actual cost per the construction agreements, and then took those for each applicable barge, took the construction cost times the appropriate composite multiplier. This is on page 17 of the exhibit. And so we have here, this is table 703.B1, where the composite multiplier, so for 2001, we can see the table doesn't go to that point. So it's bottomed out in 2002 at 39%. So we applied that 39% as the depreciation, and that determined a fair market value. For 2014, those barges, we can see the composite multiplier of 0.87. And that was applied to the original construction cost to determine the requested fair market value.
So page 6, this spreadsheet, for each of the barges, that is the value that is requested by McDonough Marine for each of these 5 barges as identified.
Correct.
So with respect to what the assessor did, is the only difference that the actual cost is the base cost that was used in the tables? Or is there a different methodology, as you understand it?
So for all the vessels total, or just these 5?
These 5.
Just these 5, the difference is that the assessor did not use the original construction cost. The assessor used the base cost method from Lat 7.
So with respect to the other barges that were reported, how did the assessor value those barges?
All other barges were that were assessed by the assessor were using the original construction cost as stated on the Lat 7 and times the composite multiplier. So it's inconsistent application or inconsistent methodologies used from the other barges versus these 5 barges.
So the assessor calculated the value for all the other barges McDonough Marine reported, just like you request on page 6 of taxpayer exhibit.
That is correct. We are with this request by the taxpayer's request, these numbers on page 6 would be consistent with how all other barges were assessed by the assessor for 2023.
And with respect to the other barges reported, were they reported on the LATs the exact same way?
Yes.
So there was no different on the LAT reporting that would have led to some other reason to value them differently?
I am not aware of any reason that they would be reported different or valued differently. They were reported the exact same manner.
Did you ever discuss this inconsistency with the assessor's office before the board review hearing?
Yes, we discussed in August through September of 2023 via emails and telephone calls.
And what was their response to your request related to these 5 barges?
They would take it under advisement. They had discussions about it, and then we were advised that they would not make changes.
So I have no further questions, Mr. Chairman.
Just a couple. Mr. Hall, I understand your testimony. Now I understand there are total of 31 barges assessed in Lafourche Parish, and 28 of those are Coast Guard certified vessels. Is it your testimony that of the 23 vessels, again, barges, that you're not protesting, that the assessor's office use those based upon original cost as reported on the LAT 5 instead of the table values?
Correct.
And what's your basis of that statement?
By reviewing the assessments, we contacted the assessor's office and requested for detail on how all the barges were valued to make sure we were in agreement. And in going through and reviewing those valuations, we were informed and our calculations reconciled that it was original cost times the tables was our understanding.
And who informed you that they valued the other 23 barges based upon the values reported in the LAT forms?
We have discussions with the assessor's office.
Who? You have a name?
Tory Berger.
Great. So you would agree it's important that an assessor value all of Marmax's barges the same way, correct?
That is what we're requesting.
Thank you. No further questions.
No reply. That's all the witnesses the taxpayer have.
Good morning, Commissioners. Brian Etiken on behalf of the Lafourche Parish Assessor's Office. As my first witness, I would like to call Assessor Wendy Thibodeau. First, Ms. Thibodeau, can you identify yourself for the record?
Oh, I gotta hold it. Okay. My name is Wendy Thibodeau. I'm the Lafourche Parish Assessor.
And let's start with your base qualifications. You're a certified Louisiana assessor, are you not?
Correct.
Do you have any other specialized training or education, evaluation methodology specifically applicable to watercraft?
Yes, I am certified with Lloyd's Maritime Academy in marine vessel valuation out
Okay.
of London, England.
And did you participate in the tax commission's rulemaking that came up with the tables that your office utilized to value these barges?
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about that process and how these values were derived?
For the last, I would say, 20 years, I have had some part, if not the majority part, in calculating watercraft tables for even legislatures, tax commission, AMSA, I get called, have quite a few calls and efforts into different calculations for watercraft over the years.
And do you know where the values that were utilized to compile these valuation tables, and it's specifically table 703B2
So,
were obtained from?
okay, so originally in 2000, and I'm going to go way back. In 2001, when I started with Lafourche Parish, the tables, AMSA, Ken Wells would call the assessor, who was my predecessor.
So who's AMSA?
AMSA is the Offshore Surface Marine Association. They deal with all sorts of vessels, not just offshore, but also barges and so forth, and the maritime. They have a membership and you pay to it, and different types, barges, offshore, anchor handler, any kind of vessel. That's who, they have a very good temperature on what's going on in the maritime industry. So Ken Wells with the AMSA would call my predecessor and they would discuss day rates and so forth back in 2001. It was before that, but that's when I started. And that was going on until 2008 when AMSA decided no longer to work with the Assessors Association and coming up with the annual tables. So from 2008 until 2020, the valuation of the vessels and barges stayed at 2008 values. When the downturn in the watercraft industry took place, that's when industry came to myself and to the tax commission to lower the values to make it more accurate on market value. That was a change. That stayed in place until 2022, I believe. And that's when it was determined by the previous tax commission that they were going to go back to the 2008 values. So it is my understanding that all of these values that you see here are representing 2008 market values for these different types of vessels, barges, so forth.
Now, when you say represent the values, I want to be clear. These values represent the replacement cost new less depreciation, but again, as of 2008.
Correct. That is my understanding.
Okay. Just a moment ago, Mr. Hall testified that he believed it was important. Well, I asked him a question. He agreed that it was important that an assessor use the same methodology to value all property. You would agree with that statement, would you
Correct.
not? Now, what caught my attention was he made a suggestion that you valued the 5 barges that they have appealed differently than the 23 other barges. Is that statement accurate?
Absolutely not. I have anywhere between 700 and 1,200 vessels a year, barges included. And it is impossible for me to go and not be uniform and consistent. We start at the company A and it is worked down to Z. And every vessel, every barge is worked up the exact same way. And cost is not used on what they report on the lat form. We always use the tables and have been since I was a deputy assessor and I worked watercraft all alone. There is no change in that procedure in my office. The watercraft department is not allowed to veer from these tables unless I give permission. And I did not give permission in the last 10 years I've been the assessor.
For any company?
For
I mean,
any company.
This is not just Marmac?
No, any
correct?
company.
Okay, Louisiana Revised Statute 472323 dictates that in using the cost approach, the assessor shall utilize a method in which the value of the property is derived by estimating the replacement or reproduction cost of the improvements, deducting therefrom the estimated depreciation, and then adding the fair market value of the land, which obviously doesn't apply. So first off, now I understand that these are 2008 numbers, but let's set that aside. Do these tables represent replacement cost less depreciation?
If you work the tables as it is dictated in the rules and regulations, it represents cost minus depreciation in addition to obsolescence for days worked.
Now, is there a difference between original cost and replacement cost?
Definitely.
And the statute requires you to use estimated replacement cost, does it not?
Correct.
Can you explain to me real quickly what the difference between original and replacement cost is?
Original cost is at that time when the product was purchased, be it a home, wood, vessel, steel, and replacement cost is what it would cost to replace that same material or item at the current time, at current day.
And again, Louisiana law requires you to use replacement cost, not original cost, does it not?
Correct.
Okay. Assessor Thibodeau, is there anything else you would like to add?
That we do the exact same calculations for every single vessel in my parish. We just have the largest amount of vessels than any other parish in the state. And the reason why that procedure is put in place is for this exact reason. The rules and regulations and the Constitution says that I must assess uniform and consistent, and I do that because in 2022, a different vessel company, a different boat company came and they asked me to veer from the tables. And not my staff, but I veered from the tables and I got reprimanded by the previous administration because I did not follow the tables. I did it one time and I refused to do that again
Now, can you elaborate? You said you were reprimanded. I mean,
by the commissioner.
you were told that you are required to follow the tables, were you not?
In writing, yes,
And that's what you did in this case. You
Yes.
followed the tables, correct?
yes.
Thank you. Please answer any questions the commissioner or opposing counsel may have.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have a question. Ms. Thibodeau, help me understand. The gentleman said that he had spoke with someone in your office pertaining to the 5 barges that wasn't inconsistent or in line with what they were talking about. Did anyone ever contact your office and speak with a Tory?
I don't know, you would have to ask Tori, but
She's our next witness.
yeah, she's here. I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't even know because we have software that works this up. You know, you put in the number that's on the table, the computer works it up. I am going to be completely honest, and you can ask Tori this. I don't even know if she would know how to work up the number off of the lat form by hand.
Thank
She may surprise, I don't know, but I can't answer for that, but I'd be.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
So, so you don't dispute what the actual cost of these vessels or barges was, right?
I'm not saying that I don't dispute it. I did not, I did not research it enough. I didn't go into researching enough on what the cost is because I am dictated by the rules and regulations to do it this way.
So my question was, Montgomery provided you with, provided your office with the contracts that said what they paid for their cost.
In 2001, 24 years ago.
Yeah.
Yes, yes,
So you don't dispute that.
10 and 20 years.
You also heard Mr.
No, I don't dispute that they gave it to me,
Don't
but
dispute that.
I don't know, no, don't put words in my mouth. I don't know because I did not research it and calculate it and go into the market and see if that's it. With the amounts that they gave me, it initially came across as scrap value, not market.
Don't dispute that is actually what they paid for them.
In the years that they said, I got to take their word for it. I didn't go check it. I'm taking it at its face value.
So you don't dispute that they paid $317,000 for 2 and $797,000 for the.
I'll give them the benefit of the doubt.
Um,
And with those purchases, there's a whole lot of things that goes into place, especially since they have 3 of them at the exact same value in the exact same year. The fact is that they probably got a deal. It's just like when you go into a subdivision and there's empty lots and they have, okay, I'll buy 10 lots. Well, I'll give you a discounted price.
You have no evidence.
No, it's pure speculation, but
So with respect to, you talked about the regulations and, using the charts and for this year, and actually it's in taxpayer exhibit on page 16 is an excerpt from the 23-year, watercraft regulations. And if you look under heading B, which talks about valuation, it says fair market value, valuation standard for watercraft. When using the cost of those, the assessor shall estimate the fair market value of each vessel having sighted in her parish through the use of the information provided them on the lat 11 form, correct?
Yeah.
And so we've talked about those before, and you have no dispute about the information provided on the lat 11 form, correct?
I said that I have to take it at face value, but I use the tables.
So in the next paragraph, it says the same procedure shall be used as for other forms of machinery and equipment, right?
Yes.
And so that's done in chapter 25, correct?
Yes.
And you're familiar with chapter?
Yes.
And so if you, and I've got a copy of chapter 25 here, and it talks about the following data that's used on having provided is the total acquisition cost of the equipment an index to adjust for cost effective inflation. So that anticipates getting the actual cost from taxpayer, correct? And then using it to determine the index to come up with the correct, value based upon its age, correct?
Chapter 25 is used for machinery and equipment. Chapter 7 is for watercraft.
And it
If
says-
there is machinery and equipment on a barge or a vessel, it is assessed separately.
What this says, same procedure shall be used as for other forms of machinery and equipment. That is, the cost of the vessel will be brought up to current value through use of the appropriate index and depreciated based on the effective age of the vessel. So my point is that incorporates the concept that we're gonna get the actual cost from the taxpayer. It says, right?
Okay.
So that in this case, with the history, the bottom line is that even though the taxpayer provided the actual cost, your argument is, I never use actual cost, I only use the figure.
I usually, what I do is that if there is a valid reason for them to have depreciation, I use the tables that the tax commission provides in the rules and regulations, and then I depreciate it from there. To stay uniform and consistent with the other 1,000 vessels that I value.
Methodology system,
And it is consistent.
methodology. Not the same.
The methodology is consistent in my office.
So Mr. Stan testified he recently sold barges up in $250,000. That same type of barge for their year.
I don't have that in order to dispute it or not. I think it's scrap cost.
You said it was.
Exactly. How am I supposed to prove that?
I'm sorry. I apologize. So, Assessor Thibodeau, one last, question. If you look at page 6 of the taxpayers exhibit, where they have that chart that, Mr. Hall testified about, and I'm not asking you to agree with the method. I'm sorry.
I don't have 6.
Yeah.
I don't have that.
You have a copy? I left it in my truck.
Copy of the exhibit. I don't know what he's looking at.
And I'm not asking you to say that it's the right answer, but if the calculations as shown on this, you don't dispute how they're calculated. I'm not saying you agree with the result, but you're just saying they calculated that under their methodology correctly. Calculated?
I'd need more time to calculate this. I mean, I need to get the composite multiplier factors, the percent good, obsolescence. And I'm not sure that this is exactly how it's worked. But
Well, page 17 has the 703B1 composite multipliers, as Mr. Hall testified about, and no obsolescence has been requested.
well, that's the days off, and all of these all of these barges worked every single day, so. in
Right,
the
no, we're
tax
not, and there's
commission
no
Yeah,
obsolescence is
That's
not an
why.
issue.
It's not that I denied it, it's just, it's not
No,
entitled to. it.
and we didn't ask for it. Melmark didn't ask for it. I'm just asking if I'm not asking you to agree that starting number is the right number, but did they do the right methodology to come up with their requested value?
Hold on, just give me 1 second.
That's the 14 tables, so 13 tables. Or 23.
These are 24 tables? If you look. Wait, hold on. If you look at page 4 and
Tax
of-
assessor exhibit.
of the assessor exhibits, this is the exact procedure and step-by-step how we calculated it. So if this is the same steps 1, 2, and 3 is the steps that Marmac took to come up with this calculation, then yes, I agree.
No. Well, what I'm asking, so I understand what you did. I'm just saying, if they were using actual costs, not the base cost, you've got to use the multiple composite factor. We're not asking for obsolescence. I'm just asking if you would agree with
To
that.
get the cost, you would take the base cost,
Let's-
what they, hold up, let me
Okay,
finish.
all right,
You would use what they reported as their base cost or acquisition cost.
okay.
Then you would multiply it by the cost index. And then it would, that would become the cost. And then you'd multiply it by the 0 obsolescence and then the 15% to get the assessed value.
So that, you said that's correct. I'm not saying you agree with how they did
Yeah,
the result.
That, if that's what they did, yes.
Okay,
I
all right.
can't say from this table, but yes, if
Okay.
that's what they did.
All right.
That's what should be done if a cost, an acquisition, anything that isn't on the table, that's how you would do it.
Okay, fair enough. One last question. Mr. Stant testified that with respect to these 5 vessels that are on charter, that the charterer is obligated to insure the hulls for $600,000. Do you dispute that?
I don't, this is the first I'm hearing of it, but I mean, if that's what he says, I gotta take his word for it.
Okay.
There's no documentation to back that up.
All right. I have no further questions.
That's it. No further questions from Ms. Taylor.
Any questions?
As my next witness, I'd like to call Ms. Tori Chesson. You need to press it. Yeah, this one, stop and make that, hold that when you talk.
Okay.
Ms. Chesson, first, could you identify yourself and your current position for the record?
Yes, I'm Tori Chasson, previously Tori Berger. I am a deputy assessor for the Lafourche Parish Assessor's Office, and I am the person who handles the watercraft assessments.
Okay, first, you cleared up one thing I was going to ask a moment ago. Mr. Hall referenced a Tori Berger. That is you. You were recently married and changed your name, correct?
Correct.
Okay. I want to start by asking about a comment that Mr. Hall made. He said that he had a conversation with you and that you advised him. Really? I very seldom hear that. Mr. Hall said that he spoke with you and that you advised him that you had assessed the 5 barges that they have appealed using the tables, but that the other 23 barges, you used the values reported on their renditions. Is that accurate?
No, that is incorrect. So I do anywhere from 600 to about 1,200 barges or watercraft vessels a year. I assess every single watercraft the exact same. I use the charts provided by the tax commission for every single vessel to stay uniform.
Okay, well, let's start. So all 28 of Marmac's barges were valued using the same tables and the same procedure, were they not?
Correct.
In fact, if I understand your testimony, every barge subject to assessment in Lafourche Parish is assessed using this same methodology, is it not?
It is. That's the only way I can stay uniform and we don't have issues of one company saying, well, you use this and for this one and not the other.
And approximately how many barges do you assess in an average year?
Altogether with regular watercraft vessels and barges, it's 600 to 1,200. For barges, it's probably close to 300 or 400 just barges.
And again, I'll keep asking you, and every single one of those was assessed using the same procedure, that is the tables promulgated in the tax commission's rules and regulations. Were they not?
Every single one. I've been doing watercraft since 2021 and I have never done it a different way.
Okay, initially I was gonna spend a lot of time talking about how you came up with these assessments, but it turns out I think everybody's in agreement. So if you could just take a look at Assessor Exhibit 1, this is pages 1 through 5. And these are a series of workup sheets for each assessment. Are they? And although I know some of the numbers are different, can you just walk through how you assess these barges?
Yes. So whenever I start the year, we'll start at January 1. The sheriff's office goes out, they take pictures, they do surveys, they let me know what barge, what vessels in LaFouche Parish. I then send out Lat 11A forms. When I receive those forms, I work up every single assessment, whether they turned in a Lat form or not. From there, I take the vessel or barge's year built, the type, and the size, and I use the appropriate chart provided by the tax commission. So for SH 262, it's a 2014 195 by 35 foot hopper barge. The lat form stated it was a hopper barge, so that's why I assessed it as a hopper barge. The base cost would be $2,200,000. With the cost index, it came out to $2,032,690. The lat form said it worked 365 days, so it gets zero obsolescence. So I take my cost and I multiply it by 100%, and then watercraft is taxed at 15%. So it's 2,032,690 times 100% times 15%. That gets me my assessed value of 304,900. Once that is complete and I do every single assessment, I then send out notice of value letters every single year.
And just to be clear, when you talked about the base cost and the index cost, those are the costs derived from the tables promulgated by the tax commission, are they not?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Chason, is there anything else you would like to add or inform the commission of?
No, I think we're good, other than the only conversations I've ever had with Mr. Hall. I repeated time and time again, we use the charts provided by the tax commission.
So there's no chance he misunderstood you on that.
No way. I've sent it in email. I've said it on phone call. I have my speech down, memorized. I say the same things to every customer, charts provided by the tax commission.
Thank you. Please answer any questions the commission members or opposing counsel may have for you.
I guess I asked that question earlier, and so my understanding is the gentleman with the taxpayer never had a conversation with you, never spoke to you on any of the issues about the 5 barges that he felt was not being taxed properly.
So he did question me. We talked and I explained it's the charts. I never said anything was assessed differently. For all 28 vessels that I assessed for Mormac, they were all assessed the exact same way. And he said, okay.
Thank you, Ms. Torrey.
So, Ms. Story, I'm Jay Adams. Nice to meet you again. So I understand your testimony. Let me ask you this question. So the looking at, let's say, for example, page 1, which is SH 262. And this is this is an explanation of how you came up with your value for that barge, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so the base cost 2.2, index 2.032. So, and I'll go back to page 6 where you have the excerpt from here. And did you point to 2.032690 is sort of where that's because it's a 2014 barge, correct?
Correct.
So Understanding your testimony that you used that methodology. So if I go back and look at that, then I go back and look at page 10, which is the notice from your office regarding a change. The fair market value of that vessel went up over $600,000 in 1 year, from 1.478 to 2.032.
Yes, that's because the charge changed from 2022 to 2023.
Charge changed, but I thought the testimony from the assessor earlier was that these are all 2008 values that had been kept in place.
Correct, but she did state from 2020 to 2022, there was a different chart. The watercraft companies complained and they went back to the 2008 values.
Right, which would make them not higher, but lower. Right.
Some of them went up, some went down. I can't speak for each individual one without looking.
So the change in value from 2022 to 2023 was $554,000, which is just a little, like $200,000 less than what they paid to purchase these barges, correct?
According to their contract value, yes.
So your testimony is with respect to every vessel, including barges that are reported in Lafourche Parish, you ignore the actual cost promulgated by the taxpayer on their lat forms.
We use the charts provided by the tax commission.
Whether it's higher or lower.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so they're winners and losers.
Yep.
I'd have no further questions, Mr. Chairman.
One quick follow-up. Could you turn to page 10 in the assessor exhibits again? This was the notice of assessment he was just asking you about. And the increase. I want to be clear. So in 2023, you testified you valued them using the tables promulgated by the commission, correct?
Correct.
And even though the value was significantly lower the prior year in 2022, you would have used the tables in place for tax year 2022, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. No further questions. And I have no further witness, commissioners.
Commissioners, do we have a motion?
I would, may I present a little rebuttal testimony?
So the taxpayer would like to present rebuttal testimony. I mean, generally that is permissible, taxpayer's appeal. Who'd you have in mind?
I was going to present Mr. Stant for one very quick.
Sure. As long as the chair is okay with that.
That's fine.
That's appropriate.
Mr. Stant, thank you for coming back up. I had a question for you. In testimony that the assessor raised, she talked about discussions with OMSA. Is Marmac related to OMSA anyhow?
Marmac is a member of OMSA, the Offshore Marine Service Association.
So any discussions, they would have been participating through OMSA with the commission?
If, I'm sorry, Jay, what's your question?
So any discussions about valuations would have been through OMSA with the commission?
I'm not aware of discussions with OMSA
Okay.
about these. And it's an offshore group.
Okay, so in Assessor Thibodeau's testimony, I asked about insurance and she said, well, there was no proof of the insurance related to these barges. And so I wanted to bring you back up and rebuttal and ask if there's any evidence we had regarding the fact that you in fact had a $600,000 insured value for these specific barges.
Correct.
And I want to hand you a document that I'm offering in rebuttal. And can you tell the commissioners what this document is?
When a company charters a barge from Marmac McDonough Marine Service, we issue a charter order that specifically identifies the vessel and the terms and conditions under which that vessel is leased or chartered. This particular charter agreement is between Marmac Corporation, McDonald Marine Service, and Echo Serve Environmental Services. And this is for barges SH 253, 54, 55, 56, 57, 58, 59, 60, 61, and 62. And these are all U.S. Coast Guard certified shale hopper barges. And the date of delivery was August 1st, 2019. The term of the charter expired July 31st, 2024. And it lists the terms and rates and also the insured value, and the charter insured value for which they need to provide insurance is $600,000 per barge.
And of those barges, they're the 5 that are at issue in this matter, correct?
That is correct.
Mr. Chairman, I'd ask that the commission accept this as rebuttal evidence in support of that specific issue raised by the assessor in her testimony.
I object. The assessor's testimony was simply that she didn't know and nothing was provided to her. And if I might ask the gentleman a question, was this document ever provided to the assessor?
I'm not aware.
Was this document pre-filed as an exhibit?
It was offered as a rebuttal to the wit testimony, and we've specifically identified rebuttal evidence as needed as raised during the testimony.
And
That
again,
issue was raised by the assessor.
Again, the assessor did not raise an issue. He asked her, did she know whether it was insured? She says, I don't know. That
I
doesn't
asked
make
her-
this rebuttal
I
evidence.
asked her, she disputed the amount, and she said, I can't verify it. I don't know anything.
And
So
that
I'm
doesn't,
offering evidence to establish that point that Mr. Stant testified
Oh.
to.
Commissioner, again, we're back to the baseline rule provided for in the rules and regulations that review of the consideration of the correctness of an assessment is limited to review of information provided to the assessor prior to the close of open books. We're seeing this document for the first time today. And I also throw in, it's not rebutting anything. She said she didn't know. If she had said, no, they only insured it for 500,000, then perhaps it would be rebuttal.
Acting
Sure.
Chair, you have a request by the taxpayer's attorney to submit additional evidence that was not pre-filed under our rules as rebuttal evidence. Assessor obviously objects to it under 2 bases: 1, it was not pre-filed, and 2, it was not ever provided to the assessor. You can take the objection under advisement and simply deal with it in the written decision, or you can rule upon it from the bench. Your prerogative. Have it make a recommendation if you want one.
No, I'll make a recommendation. We're gonna stay pretty consistent on this. We haven't been accepting evidence if it hadn't been already turned in for us to look, and I won't stay on that, and make a motion to, keep that evidence out.
So motion would be to deny the
Deny.
the taxpayer's request to offer the additional evidence as rebuttal. Any discussion on the motion? Objection?
Motion adopted.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to proffer this into the record for appeal purposes.
That's certainly appropriate. If you provide a copy to Chandrika, we'll make sure it is made part of the administrative record as a proffer. Mhm. Any additional testimony or?
No, sir.
We have no additional testimony.
So, Mr. Acting Chair, the case has been presented. Options before you. You can take it under advisement, accept a motion to take this matter under advisement for further consideration, or make a motion to affirm the assessment or set a different value. But you accept the motion. for any of
Mr.
those
Chairman,
options.
I move that we put this item under advisement.
I agree. We put this under advisement.
So motion is to take it under advisement. Any discussion on that motion? Any objection? So, Mr. Chair, the motion will stand adopted.
Motion stand adopted.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Commissioners. Thank you.
In consideration, any other matters from this commission? None? Okay. Have a motion. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to, make a motion to adjourn.
Second. Adopted.